At their peak, they were selling more records than anyone on the planet. More than the Beatles. More than the Rolling Stones. 4 people from a small country nobody expected, and the entire world couldn't stop listening. Then one day, with no announcement, no farewell concert, no goodbye of any kind, they were simply gone. That band was ABBA, and this is the story nobody told you. It was the spring of 1974, in Brighton. The walls of the Brighton Dome still held the cold April air inside. 4 young musicians from a small Swedish town stood just off stage, looking at each other, microphones in hand, and in their hearts an endless uncertainty. They were representing Sweden at the Eurovision Song Contest, but none of them truly knew what that stage was about to mean. Agnetha Feldskog took a deep breath before walking out. The trembling in her voice wasn't only nerves. She had left her young daughter behind, just a few days earlier, to be here. Björn Ulvaeus glanced at his wife, a look that held both reassurance and a weariness no one spoke about. Benny Andersson sat down at his keyboard and placed his fingers on the keys, and Anni-Frid Lyngstad, entirely unaware of what the rest of the world was about to feel, prepared herself for the note that would change everything. Waterloo rang out. The room shook. That night, millions of people across Europe had their eyes on their screens. In Sweden, crowds gathered outside bar windows, and when Waterloo ended, the wave of applause swallowed the hall whole. As the votes came in, one country after another, ABBA won. This is a story that could happen to anyone, a story of success. But years later, when someone asks you what that night felt like, you'll only smile, because what you'll remember isn't the triumph. You'll remember it as the beginning of everything you were about to lose. But beneath the glitter of that Brighton stage, something was slowly catching fire, and no one was watching it yet. Agnetha and Björn were a couple. Benny and Anni-Frid were a couple. 2 marriages, 4 voices, 1 group. And history had shown us, time and time again, that arrangements like this always came with a price. But that night was not ABBA's peak. That night was only the beginning. And beginnings are always the most dangerous moments of all. After the Eurovision victory, everything changed at a dizzying speed. Record labels were knocking on doors, radio stations pushed them to the top of the charts, newspapers put their faces on covers. But inside the Stockholm studio, through hours and hours of recording sessions, 4 musicians were still searching for the same thing, that perfect sound. Benny and Björn had a remarkable chemistry as songwriters. Benny felt melody, not just musically, but emotionally. The rhythm inside a sentence, the weight a single word could carry. Björn translated feelings into lines that ordinary people could understand. Phrases that rhymed not just in sound, but in truth. When the 2 of them worked together, time disappeared. They'd walk into the studio in the morning and look up to find it was midnight. Agnetha's voice was something else entirely. She could carry sadness in such a way that even a joyful song would carry a crack of vulnerability inside it. Anni-Frid's voice, powerful, warm, full, did the opposite. She gave hope to even the most sorrowful notes. When those 2 voices met, what came out was more than music. It was emotional geometry. But here is what was so deeply unsettling about all of it. The voice that was conquering the world was also the voice of 2 couples, slowly drifting apart. And no one was noticing. Not yet. Fernando, Dancing Queen, Mamma Mia. Each single outran the last. In 1976, Dancing Queen reached number 1 in the UK. America opened its doors. In Japan, scenes broke out that resembled Beatlemania. Thousands of people waited at airports just to catch a glimpse of them. Police set up cordons. Cars had to be changed for security reasons. But somewhere down the corridor, away from the noise of the crowds, Agnetha sat in silence. Fame brought her no joy. She didn't like large gatherings. Instead of after-show celebrations, she spent her evenings in hotel rooms, writing letters to her child. For her, fame was not a reward. It was a price she had agreed to pay. Think about that for a moment. What would you do inside all that brilliance? You're shining on stage, smiling in photographs. But somewhere inside you, a voice keeps saying, "I don't belong here." That was exactly how one of ABBA's members felt, every single night. From the outside, it looked like the group's most productive period. The album was released, received near-perfect reviews, broke sales records. But if you stepped outside the studio, the atmosphere was different. Bjorn and Agnetta's marriage was cracking. Tours, long separations, endless studio hours, all of it weighs on a relationship. But there was something else on top of that. Being a couple in front of the camera. Working together every single day, performing together, singing the same song in the same room, but no longer speaking the same language. When the separation was announced, fans were shocked. The press descended. Every headline asked the same question. Is ABBA over? But the band answered that question in the most powerful way they could. With "The Winner Takes It All." This song became one of ABBA's greatest, and there was a reason for that. It was real. Completely, ruthlessly real. The words had been written by Bjorn, but Agneta was the one who had to stand in front of that microphone and sing them. Her own divorce, her own pain, in front of the world. Through a small window in the recording booth, while Benny and Bjorn watched from the other side. And right there, everything shifted. Because ABBA was no longer just a band that made music. ABBA had become a mirror, one that reflected the most private emotions of the human experience back at us. And mirrors, sometimes, shatter. That morning in the recording studio, everyone had arrived early. Benny settled at the keyboard, Bjorn looked over his notes, the engineers adjusted the levels, and Agneta was different that day. No one could quite put into words why, but they all felt it. When the song began, when the first verse came out, a silence fell over the studio. The engineers looked at each other. Benny's eyes filled with tears while his hands stayed on the keys. Bjorn turned toward the window. Agneta wasn't crying while she sang, but her voice was in a place where every single word carried both an ache and the dignity of someone fighting back against that ache. I don't want to talk about the things we've gone through. The recording ended. A long silence followed. Then someone said, "That is one of the greatest vocal performances in the world." No one disagreed. Sometimes a song becomes more than the story it tells. The Winner Takes It All was that kind of song. And what Agneta carried into that studio that day, that vulnerability, that dignity, that quiet grief, was exactly what made ABBA permanent. Not fame, not sales figures, the human thing. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet, because when the group disbanded in 1982, the world barely noticed. There was no official announcement, no farewell concert, just silence. By the end of 1981, Benny and Anni-Frid had also separated. Both couples that formed the heart of the group were now gone. The practical impossibility of continuing was equalled only by the emotional one. Their final album, The Visitors, was released. Critics received it with respect. Fans listened with love. But inside the group, everyone knew this was a farewell album. The kind of farewell a careful listener could detect in the lyrics, but one that was never spoken aloud to anyone. The final recordings were made in 1982. The last interviews were given. And then, nothing happened. The group never officially announced that it was over. They simply drifted away from each other, and the music stopped. Wait, don't miss this detail. ABBA never actually said the words, "We're done." Years later, in interviews, the members would say things like, "We took a break for a while," as if 40 years of silence had been nothing more than a pause. And that silence lasted 4 decades, until one day, without any warning, a piece of news came out of Stockholm. After ABBA disappeared, something strange happened. Their music didn't disappear with them. Through the mid-80s, from discos to pop stages, from radio stations to house parties, ABBA kept playing. New generations were learning the songs. Mothers were teaching Dancing Queen to their daughters. The Winner Takes It All played at weddings. A band that had released nothing, toured nowhere, and made no appearances, somehow remained more alive than most acts currently working. The music industry had no framework for what it was witnessing. In 1999, the Mamma Mia musical opened. The world watched it, cried, laughed, and gave it standing ovations. In 2008, the film adaptation was released and grossed over $600 million worldwide. ABBA had become a brand, but had never been reduced to a commercial object. There was still a feeling in that music, a real one, but the 4 members themselves? They had gone their separate ways. Agneta was living a reclusive life, rarely stepping into the public eye, retreating from the light. Anni-Frid had moved to Switzerland, occasionally returning to the stage, but on her own terms. Benny continued creating, working with new musicians, always in the studio. Bjorn focused on writing and musicals. Years passed. Whenever the question came, "Will you reunite as ABBA?" they answered it politely, clearly, and firmly. No. You won't believe this, but in 2018, after 35 years of silence, a studio booking was made in Stockholm, and this time it was for ABBA. It was 2021. The world was slowly emerging from the exhaustion of the pandemic. In October, a small leak appeared on social media, a rumour that ABBA had been working on new music. People laughed. They said it was impossible. Then the official announcement came. The Voyage album was announced. 2 new singles were released, "I Still Have Faith in You" and "Don't Shut Me Down." And across every corner of the world, at the exact same moment, millions of people got to their feet. But when the music started, Benny Andersson later said in an interview, "It was as if we'd never left." The vocal harmony, that indescribable chemistry, it was all still there. Time had passed, but the melodic instinct, that unconscious alignment, had not gone anywhere. It took us decades to ask this question, but the answer had always been right in front of us. Why is ABBA immortal? ABBA is immortal because they were not perfect. Between the 4 of them, there were marriages, divorces, grievances, and escapes. Fame could not destroy them, because they were never living for fame in the first place. And that is precisely why fame never left them. ABBA is immortal because emotions are universal. The Winner Takes It All is not in Swedish, not in English. It's in human. The quiet dignity of a relationship ending, the strength that exists inside vulnerability. These are understood in every language, every culture, every generation. ABBA is immortal because there is truth inside their music. 4 people walked into a studio, carrying not performances, but lived experience. The recording equipment didn't only capture their voices, it captured something real. Today, ABBA's music is streamed in more than 150 countries. The 4 members are now in their 70s, but their music is still 17 years old. The stage lights may have gone out, but the sound is still ringing. A band doesn't just sing songs. Sometimes a band looks at the world and says, "Look, you can go through pain and still make something beautiful." ABBA said that, and the world listened.